Hello. It's good to be back. Can you hear me so far? Let me know if you can hear me. Hello. Welcome back. It's good to see some familiar faces. Can y'all hear me? Awesome. Yay, I'm very glad. Hi there. How are you guys? How is your day going so far? I know I'm a few minutes early. I figured I'd hop on and kind of let people start coming in a while, see how y'all are doing, make sure everything's working okay. Like I said in my last broadcast and on my channel, we're going to be talking Map of the Soul 7 today. So it's going to be a little bit more structured than last time. Um, I have a couple of things planned, but mostly I, kind of just want to talk with everybody about, Map of the Soul 7. I think technically the anniversary was technically yesterday. I'm here in the United States, so time difference wise, I believe technically it would have been yesterday for me. But today was the day that worked better for live streaming purposes. So for today, we're celebrating the 5th anniversary today. So. We'll give it a few minutes since like I said, I'm a little bit early. I know I had set it to start at 11:45 my time here in the East Coast of the United States. So I'll give everybody a couple minutes to see if more people come on in. Um, Looks like we have a couple people so far. Feel free to say hi in the chat. We're all friendly here to anybody who may not be chatting. And let me know how I sound. Let me know, as usual, if there's any background noise or any issues with the mic. Awesome, cool. Drive safely, and I hope you enjoy listening as you drive. Awesome. Thank you for letting me know. I'm glad everything sounds good so far. This is going to be an interesting broadcast as well because I've made a bunch of screens. So, kind of like the screen that you guys are seeing right now. And then, like, when I did my test broadcast, I just sort of had a basic screen up since we were just chatting. For this one, I made a bunch of different screens for the different things I'm going to be talking about. So, there's going to be a lot of transitions and things. So unfortunately, for those of you listening podcast style, you won't see the screens. They're nothing too fancy. They're just kind of backgrounds. But I'm kind of curious if they work and if they look good. So new experience. I have literally a different little screen. Just very minimal movement, very minimal, just kind of stuff on the screen, just to have something up when I'm talking. For each song throughout the Map of the Soul. Technically, both Map of the Soul Persona and Map of the Soul 7. So And thank you very much. I'm glad you like the beginning, the beginning screen. I made all of these on Canva, so I'm by no stretch of the imagination a graphic designer or somebody with like a lot of graphic design knowledge. So like all of my thumbnails, all my graphics and stuff, I'm literally just doing my best making it on Canva. Not a trained graphic artist at all. So it is 11:45 my time right now. I'll give it a couple more, like maybe another minute or two, just to see. I'm sure more people kind of join us in the middle. And as always, this will go up on the channel as well. So if you do happen to miss anything, either on the front end or the back end, you can watch it on the channel when it goes up. The goal of today's stream, this is the stream that I had the original idea for, the thing that kind of made me want to start doing live streams in the first place, is I really wanted to talk about Map of the Soul 7. As you guys probably know from last time, Map of the Soul 7 is like the album that came out kind of like when I first became ARMY. So I really wanted to talk about it for its 5th anniversary. But I knew that I wasn't going to be able to get a full video up about the entire album in that time. So I was like, let's do live broadcast. So that's what we're going to be doing today, is really digging into Map of the Soul 7 and Map of the Soul in general. This is not in lieu of a video. I definitely will make a video of it still. But I wanted to do this for the anniversary. Hi, Christine. Welcome. It's good to see you. So yeah, so that's what we'll be talking about today. Gonna be a lot, just like I said, kind of going through each of the songs. And even though I sort of like have not a schedule, sounds like a little bit too forceful. I just sort of have notes of where I want to take everything, but I also want you guys to kind of, run this with me and sort of tell me what you want to see, what you want to talk about, and so even though I have kind of the order of the album to go through and things like that, you guys are definitely going to be, running the show today. So, oh, you're very welcome, and I'm glad you're enjoying. Thank you for being here. Thank you for enjoying it with me. I love Map of the Soul, so I was very eager to talk about it. So, all right. So this is just kind of my little landing screen. Hopefully that changed over for everybody. Just to sort of, we were just kind of talking a little bit about what the live stream is, but just a couple different things. I'm going to be going over just kind of the album overview, some of the lyrics, some of the music videos, some of how the songs went over, how they were made, how the albums were made. Nothing too crazy or fancy, but just a little bit of, background of Map of the Soul to celebrate, because it's the 5th anniversary. It's actually funny. I was looking online, and it looks like some ARMY kind of share in this sort of feeling, and I totally agree with this, of being surprised that it's the 5th anniversary of Mot 7, because as I saw a couple people online saying, it feels like it was literally just like 2 or 3 years ago, or like it was just released recently, and that's how I feel too. Map of the Soul 7 will always be really, really special to me, because I literally became ARMY like a week before Map of the Soul 7 came out for a completely different reason. Like I think I said in my practice broadcast last week, I became ARMY just on Valentine's Day, randomly on Valentine's Day of 2020. So I just hit 5 years as an ARMY just, a couple days ago, and was completely surprised that they were releasing an album. It was literally, I had just become ARMY, and it was, oh, look, BTS has a new album. That's cool. Didn't know it was going to be Map of the Soul 7 and be such an incredible, iconic album. I was still getting to know like their whole discography and everything, and so I kind of got launched into Map of the Soul and the Map of the Soul era very unexpectedly. And that was very fun. And, you know, got to see like some very iconic songs and iconic music videos and performances as like some of the first pieces of BTS content that I was seeing. And so, like The Tonight Show, when they did The Tonight Show and On in Grand Central Station, you know, that was some of my first content. And so it was very cool to see some of this stuff and have it be first up. Yeah, it was a very exciting time period. It was really fun. I think one of the first pieces of like live, you know, for lack of a better word, you know, kind of like it's happening now type BTS content that I saw was actually, I believe it was a Today Show interview. And that was literally like, why is BTS on the Today Show? I saw it on, you know, YouTube. And then it was like, oh, they have a new album. That's cool. And from there, it was just off to the races. And, you know, I got to fall in love with On and Black Swan as some of like my earliest BTS songs. And they're still, you know, two of my favorites, my top favorites to this day. So a lot of what I got to experience kind of right when Map of the Soul 7 first dropped, a lot of that kind of stayed with me and was really formative to me becoming an ARMY and an ARMY theorist. As we mentioned last time, it was Wings and Blood, Sweat, and Tears that kind of really cemented me as an ARMY theorist, but Map of the Soul 7 definitely kicked it off. Like I'm a writer kind of just like as a hobby in my day-to-day life. So like watching their music videos, like being exposed to BTS's music videos were some of the most creative music videos I've ever seen. So that kind of like really drove my creativity for a period of time as well, because I was just so, you know, enamored by the On story video and things like that. And so just a lot of their music and their videos for Map of the Soul 7 were really creatively impactful to me as well as just like really helping cement me as an ARMY. And then I was supposed to go to the Map of the Soul tour, as I believe I mentioned last time. And of course, obviously, all of the Map of the Soul tour eventually got canceled. But that was another really early ARMY experience as well, was thinking, hey, they're going to be half an hour away from where I live. I could go see BTS. So definitely it would have been a lot closer than Los Angeles, like we were talking about last time. So I wanted to ask you guys as well, what are your experiences with Map of the Soul, either for people who became ARMY after Map of the Soul came out, went back to kind of discover it, or people who were already ARMY when Map of the Soul, and you know, both Persona, Map of the Soul Persona back in 2019 and Mot 7 in 2020. What was your guys' experience with those albums? And also just to anybody who wasn't here earlier when I said hello, and let me know how you are doing. I hope you guys have been having a good week so far. So just let me know. Hello, what? Welcome to the chat. Filter was the first song you ever heard from BTS. That is very cool. I got a little, you know, because of COVID and quarantine, obviously, like the boys and Big Hit did a lot of stuff to keep ARMY entertained. And so they had done the Bang Bang Con concerts where they showed some of their old concerts. And so I did around that time get temporarily distracted by Wings and kind of went down the Wings rabbit hole for a while. So I didn't listen to all of Map of the Soul 7 right away. But like some of my early songs, in addition, of course, to like On and Black Swan and Boy With Love and things like that, Dionysus, some of the solo songs, like, or not solo songs, but like group, you know, the kind of like the rap line and the vocal line songs, and some of those where they did kind of those little offshoot groups. Some of those are some of my first ones, some of my early ones in Mot 7 as well. So like Friends and UGG and 0 O'Clock. Moon, yes, I completely agree with that for Moon. Um, I remember hearing Moon for the first time, and it's such an upbeat, happy song. And just knowing to myself, like when I look up the lyrics of this song, I know it's gonna hit so different. And I remember looking up the lyrics to Moon and getting so emotional and getting so teary eyed. And I'm just like, it's such a happy, upbeat song, but the lyrics are just so beautiful and so poignant. Oh, that's a fun one for your first one, Karen. The Tiny Desk concert. That's a really good one. I love the energy of the Tiny Desk concert. It's such a blast. And hello to everybody who I see saying hi. It's good to have you here. Jamais vu. That's a good first one. And a few weeks before Festa 2020. Really good time. Unfortunately, everything was on pause because of COVID, but the Festa content was so iconic that year because it was their 7th anniversary, of course. I love Festa 2020. I love that dinner. I love all the little treats that they gave us. Obviously, that was my first Festa because I had just become Army of in February of that year. And I didn't even know what Festa was. I was just, going through Army spaces, and I was like, what are people talking? What is Festa? What do they mean? And so it was, the most fun stretch of time to just be all of a sudden launched into that. And I still love Festa. So today we're going to be having, when we have our discussions, there's going to be a few things that I'm talking about. And like I said earlier, I'm planning on making a much longer, much more detailed video about the topic of Map of the Soul 7. So I'm not going to be digging too deep into my notes here today, but I will be digging into my notes somewhat. So a lot of what I'm going to be saying, a lot of what I'm going to be referencing comes from these 4 sources. It's going to be Namjoon's breakdown of the album, which you can still find under that title on Weverse Live. Used to be on V Live, of course. Now it's on Weverse Live. So if you go back to 2020, I believe he did this broadcast in like early March, if I'm not mistaken. Of 2020, and this is of course where he goes through the album and breaks everything down. So a lot of what I talk about, and I believe I forgot to put on this little source list here, but I also did the same thing for his Persona, his breakdown of the Persona album as well from 2019. So a lot of notes are going to be coming from what he has said in those broadcasts about the 2 albums. And then the Map of the Soul 7 comeback live, which again was first on V Live and then made its way to Weverse Live. So I use that as a source as well. And then the press conferences, of course, for the 2 albums for Map of the Soul Persona and Map of the Soul 7. There's a lot of interesting quotes and things from the boys in their press conferences. So I'll be using a lot of material from those sources. And then a lot of, like, when I go through the images and I have images on the screen, a lot of these are coming directly from sources, whether that source is like a performance or a music video. And then a lot of it will also be coming from concerts. So you'll see images from Map of the Soul 1, their online concert that they did in late 2020, Bang Bang Con the Live, which was their first live stream concert during COVID and quarantine. Their 2019 MMA performance, in which they did some of the songs from Map of the Soul Persona, and then some images from BTS Week on The Tonight Show, which will be a little bit more minor in terms of like what images I'm using and things. But still, I think BTS Week on The Tonight Show, when they did that, much later in 2020, I think was just very iconic and a really important part of the Map of the Soul era. So I have some pictures from all of those if if you're wondering where any of those come from. What it says, actually, I'm reading now the book Map of the Soul. That is awesome. I still want to read that. That actually is a good segue for me to also add a disclaimer to this. When I talk about the Map of the Soul concept, either today or in future videos, I don't really know much about psychology, or, anything about, Jungian psychology, anything like that. Basically, all of my knowledge of it comes from this album and comes from looking things up about this album. So I by no means am an expert on this. So definitely take everything that I say about it with a grain of salt, because I'm very much still learning about that topic. But as always, anybody who's here now or who's watching this later, if this is kind of your field of expertise, I always love to learn more. So please feel free to teach me anything that you know or find out as you go through the process, because I am definitely still learning myself. Hello, welcome. Good to see some familiar faces from the first live stream. I'm glad to see you all here. And so while we're here as well, I also wanted to ask all of you to get your opinions. So like I said, we're going to be kind of talking about like a lot of the songs, and just going through sort of different discussions of the songs and the music videos. And so I wanted to ask you guys what you think, and it might also depend on how much time we have as well, because I'll probably be here until about 2:30 Eastern time, so for about the next 2.5 hours. So it just kind of depends on how our time is running. But did you guys want to like watch the music videos with me? Do we want to try and go through that? That's going to be a new experience for me because I'm still so new to streaming. So we'll have to kind of see how it works, but we can definitely play with that and see how it works. Or if you'd prefer to just talk rather than watch the videos, if we just want to talk about them, that's cool too. Whatever you guys kind of think and whatever you feel, let me know. You've been trying to buy Map of the Soul 7 for a year. I know sometimes the albums are surprisingly hard to get, and I'm here in the United States. I can imagine it's much harder in Europe and other countries for Army to get. And it's always kind of surprising to me that sometimes it's actually even hard to get them through the Weaver shop, because I would just feel like that is basic step one, is be able to buy the albums. So it is kind of staggering how difficult it can be. So as we discussed today, as we kind of move through, please feel free to just kind of chime in with your thoughts throughout. Right now, we're just sort of talking about the album overview. Um, yeah, I think that some of the behind the scenes stuff can be a little bit more obscure at times. So definitely no shame in not having watched any of these, but they are amazing. I think that they are all such valuable parts of an album. And so I always try and include bits and pieces of them when I do videos. So I definitely highly recommend watching any of them if you have access to them. They're fantastic. That's a good point, Bo. I'm actually not sure about that either, because a lot of what I've seen because I wasn't sure about playing music and stuff for streams as well, and I don't know if that would affect me because I'm not monetized. So I don't know, like, whenever I post a video that has music video clips in it, I do get like a notice that says like, hey, this is under copyright by Hive Labels. But it doesn't affect my ability to have the videos up and show them to you guys. It would just affect if I was monetized. But since I'm not monetized, it doesn't really affect anything. I don't know how that would affect live streams, and I don't know. I'm still very new to this game, so I don't know if maybe for for today we hold off on that and I come back with a little bit more research, or we experiment with it one day. Because I'm still it's kind of hard. You do see a lot of information online about how it affects your channel when it's monetized, but not so much when you're not monetized like I am. So I'm still very much in the dark about that. So the first thing that I did want to discuss, just kind of as we dive in to this topic, we kind of actually were just talking about it because we were mentioning Carl Jung's book and things like that, is just basically the basics of the Map of the Soul albums. And even though, I'm here talking today about the 5th anniversary of Map of the Soul 7, I am also including a lot of Persona in this because those two albums, they're so reliant on each other. So obviously we know that the persona, shadow, and ego concepts in the album do come from Carl Jung, and the Map of the Soul itself is a Carl Jung term. And this was kind of a suggestion from Big Hit to BTS as a good topic for them to go off of, because they wanted to sort of follow up from the very outward focused Love Yourself series to a more inward introspective focus, sort of going from loving yourself to who are you really at your core. It is funny though, kind of speaking as we were about some of the behind the scenes, like Namjoon's album breakdowns and things. Even as early as Wings, they were actually already talking about Carl Jung concepts in June's breakdown of Wings. I believe he mentions like the ego and some of that, those Map of the Soul type of things. And so they were already kind of talking about these concepts even as far back as 2016 or earlier. So it's kind of funny how that worked. But we do also kind of have the inkling from what Namjoon says in his broadcasts about the albums that they were likely supposed to be 3 albums, which makes sense when you consider the 3 components of the Map of the Soul being the persona, the shadow, and the ego. We were most likely supposed to get all 3 of those. But he kind of talks about it a little bit, how when they took a little bit of an extended break, it shortened the amount of time they had to work on the album. So instead of having it be those 3 albums, it became Map of the Soul Persona and then Map of the Soul 7, which encompassed both the shadow and the ego. But I think that you can still really see all, components of when it was 3 albums still in Mot 7. So that's really interesting to me as well. Oh, yes, that's really interesting. I did actually read, or I should say I listened to an audio copy of Murray Stein's book about Map of the Soul. I believe it is literally called Map of the Soul in the World of BTS. And it is really interesting. I kind of used it as like a bit of a primer to get myself sort of just basically acquainted with the concept of the Map of the Soul. And because like I said, I don't really know a lot about psychology, so it was really interesting to see his breakdowns of the album, of the songs. And obviously he's not coming to it from a fan perspective, so he's not coming at it and saying, this is what this means within BTS's discography, or this is what it means within their personal journey. He's coming at it more from this is what it means through the components of the Map of the Soul. But it's really, really interesting when we put it together with like our interpretations as ARMY. And I've never watched the interviews that he did, but I bet that's really interesting. I would love to take a peek and look at those to add to my already very extensive notes about his book, because it's a very interesting read, or in my case, interesting to listen to. The other thing that I always am really interested about with Map of the Soul 7 is the time period in which it was created, because we know that originally 2020 is when they would have had to start their military service. And obviously, we're living right now as they come to the end of their military service. So we know that things got delayed. They got that extension. And, a lot of things changed in terms of their music and their kind of popularity and how the world viewed them. But when Map of the Soul 7 was made, I personally believe that they were treating it like it was kind of their last little, note to ARMY and their last record of themselves. And in some way, I do think that they almost intended it to be like their magnum opus. And again, that's something that Namjoon talks about a lot in his breakdown for Map of the Soul 7, is he talks about it as this beginning and ending sort of effect, that it starts with, who they were and where they came from, and ends with where they are. And there's a lot of, kind of memories that are contained within Map of the Soul 7. It's very much an album of memory. And I think it's communicating a lot of those memories and emotions at that time over their 7 years to ARMY, and kind of telling that story, which is also interesting. I don't know a whole lot about K-pop other than what I have kind of learned. We were talking last week about, ARMY content like Rise of Bangtan and things like that. And I know in that and in BTS's own book, they talk a little bit about sort of the idea of idol groups only lasting 7 years. So for MOT7 to be coming out in their 7th year, they knew they would likely have to start military service and go on a cool down. It is really interesting how much of Map of the Soul 7 kind of feels like it was designed to be this grand conclusion. It's an intensely impressive choice for a concept, and so meaningful to both. Yes, I agree. I love that they chose something that introspective, because I think it would have been really easy. Yeah, and there is a lot of very, and I mean this in the best way possible, there's a lot of very over the top elements of Map of the Soul 7 when you look at songs like On or Dionysus, big performance songs, or, songs that have just insane choreography like Black Swan, or that were very performable like Boy With Love. And so there is a lot of great over-the-top stuff in Map of the Soul 7, but the themes are so introspective. And I think that is really beautiful to kind of bring ARMY into that and have that sort of, there's like Black Swan is a great example. There's so much about that song that is so raw and vulnerable. And a lot of the solo songs are the same way on this album. They're very, very introspective. They're very, very personal. And to make that into an album to sort of celebrate those things with ARMY using, such a personal introspective tool like the Map of the Soul concept is just really, really special to me. And I think it's such a valuable album because it was created with that idea of communication and sharing with ARMY. I agree. What the coincidences in numerology in BTS are really, really crazy to me. And even within kind of Jung himself had a lot of ideas about like numbers and how they worked within the self, which is something that Murray Stein talks about in his book, that like each of the numbers 1 through 7 have a meaning. And it's just like, it's really kind of funny and just coincidental because they're just a 7-member group, but there's so many things that work with that. I like that description, Karen, that the album is a way for like just for people to grow and kind of be healthy mentally and spiritually and physically, and just, which again I think is something that they talk about in that book as well, of just like the different elements of how Jung saw the self and they all were connected. And I do really love that when you go through the album and you look at it all piece by piece. I really do think it's speaking to so many different parts of the self, and the flow of this album to me is just unbelievable. Like the way all of the songs flow into one another is so interesting to me. And a lot of their albums, strive to tell a story. That was a big thing in the Love Yourself era, was like the structure of the albums were like the storytelling structure. But I think you can also really see that structure, that storytelling structure here as well, because just so many of the songs relate to each other so well. That is so true, Christine. They never expected to be performing forever, but we will all be growing old together. I always love hearing the members talk about that. It's so sweet to me that they want to perform. The running joke is we'll be performing and until we're old men. And I think that's really sweet. Especially when you look at something like Map of the Soul 7 kind of almost being like, feeling like an end to them and knowing that it wasn't their end. That's really good. Don't feed the bears. Keeping themselves sane and sharing the path and its hurdles with a lot of lost people. Yeah, I think that's such a perfect description. Yeah, distinguish between the idol and the actual person. And I think just, you wouldn't think that such a complicated topic and 7 years plus, their trainee years, so more like a decade of their lives, you wouldn't think that something so complicated would be able to get distilled down into, if you add both albums together, 21 songs. But they really, really manage it. And it's just the concepts that they're able to describe within the songs, and the way they're able to show their growth and the way they've changed and evolved as people and put all of it into these albums is so impressive to me. And I'm really interested myself in that, the fact that a lot of these songs are sort of almost like reboot songs from older things, like while still honoring those older songs, but creating something new here for the Map of the Soul era. And I think they do a really good job, in my opinion at least, of taking those older concepts and updating them in a way that shows their growth. And even by just like referencing older songs in a really meaningful way, there's actually a surprising amount of that throughout Map of the Soul. I think the most obvious one is, of course, how Boy with Love was kind of done as a redo / a reboot of Boy in Love from School Love Affair. And then On is a deliberate reverse of the song No. I always have that mental image of when they were did the Subway interview with Jimmy Fallon, and they're talking about, oh, our second single was No, and now we're doing On, it's a reverse. And I can just see them all in my head doing that, doing the reverse hand gesture with Jimmy Fallon to show that On was the reverse of No. But I really like those concepts, and I like the way they often were performing the older songs alongside the newer songs. We see that a lot with, like, for instance, I had mentioned the 2019 MMA, and they did that in the 2019 MMA of doing Boy in Love and then doing Boy with Love. And I think that's really interesting. There is so much. This is why I ended up doing this live stream, because I was looking at my notes for everything on Map of the Soul 7, and I knew there was no way I would be able to make a video in time for its 5th anniversary. And when I was like, let's just talk about it together, and then I'll do a video at some point down the line where we talk about everything, because there's just so much to dig into. And it's all fascinating. It's all great, but it can be a lot. It can be overwhelming. But this era is just so interesting to me. It's so much stuff. I really think almost like if you needed a crash course on BTS, the Map of the Soul era would kind of give you that crash course, because you have so much to look at, and it's so much of their story, and it's so much of their previous work. And I love that. So it can be a lot, though. Do you think that Boy with Love shows a point where they love themselves and can have healthier relationships than where they were at Boy in Love? Yes, I do actually think that. And Maurice Stein talks about that in the book as well, about how when you're like in love, it's almost like a possession, like you're possessed by love, you're overtaken by love. Whereas like when you're with love, you are a little bit more evolved. And I personally, I see the Boy with Love reboot as being the difference between singing to fill a persona the way they maybe were when they were doing Boy in Love, and then singing to like real love, like Army, and becoming people who wanted to love Army and have that as kind of like the driving force behind them, because Namjoon has talked about how he wrote most of the Persona songs with Army in mind. And I really do feel like in Boy with Love, you can kind of see them sort of showing their growth. Because I always, in the title of the song, I always look at with as almost like an action word. You know, it's not like Murray Stein says, in is almost a possession word. I feel like with always kind of reminded me is almost like a closing of a letter. Like if you would write a letter and it would be signed from the Boys with Love. Like that's always kind of what I felt Boy with Love kind of represented. And that sort of using the word with is a little bit more self-assured. It's a little bit more truer. That's really interesting about kind of talking about the ripple effect as well, because it kind of is interesting to look, and obviously so much of their journey and their trajectory got messed up by COVID, but it really is interesting, I think, how much Map of the Soul served as a springboard, and I really, I do find it really fascinating how a lot of Map of the Soul's concepts, even though everything got tamped down by COVID and quarantine, so many of its concepts live on. How many years did it take them? So, to the best of my knowledge, I'm just based on like things that Namjoon has said in his broadcasts and even in their own their own book. I believe they kind of started thinking about it as soon as they were done with Love Yourself. And like I said, they were at least aware of the Map of the Soul concept as early as 2016, because June is talking about it in conjunction with Wings. So at the very least, however he knows about it, Namjoon at least knew about the concept as early as 2016. And it is interesting. I believe Damien, the book Damien that a lot of Wings is based on, I believe there is a lot of Jungian psychology in that as well, if I'm not mistaken. So there was a lot of Jungian elements kind of present in their work earlier. But once Love Yourself was done and they were looking for a more introspective kind of topic to cover, that's when they started looking a little bit more heavily into Map of the Soul 7, Map of the Soul as a concept, and that's when they started doing Map of the Soul Persona. And they were, June has kind of mentioned they were supposed to have those 3 separate album concepts, and then they went on a little bit of a break. And if you watch Bon Voyage season 4, you can actually see. We don't, if you were watching it at the time that it aired, you didn't know what he was working on. But when we go back and we watch it with a little bit more hindsight, we can see that Namjoon is working on songs for Map of the Soul 7 on the plane to New Zealand and in New Zealand itself. And he's talked about that in broadcasts, like that there are different areas where you can see him working, and he even mentioned like what song he was working on at what time. So even when they were kind of on the little trip to New Zealand, he was still kind of working on it. So it is kind of wild to imagine that this album was made in such a relatively short period of time when you consider how much is on the album and how much thought went into it. And obviously it wasn't just Namjoon working on that, because we know so many of the other members, they were working on their own solo songs as well. So, pretty much every member's solo song has them doing their lyrics or them adding concepts. We know that a lot of other members stepped up to do a lot of writing. And so that's another reason why I love Map of the Soul 7 so much, is you can really, really feel the collaborative effort, and even in other albums where they have amazing solo work, I feel like you really feel the collaborative effort and their own personal touches in this solo work. And so I just, everything about Map of the Soul, I think, is just so meaningful to just BTS as a concept. The other thing that I wanted to mention too, while we were talking about song like redos and reboots, is it's really interesting how the Rapline songs sample some of their older songs. So it's like Intro Persona samples the School Love Affair intro, and Shadow samples the Oh Are You Late Too intro, and Ego very famously samples that beginning part of the BTS debut trailer. So it's very interesting to me. I agree. The themes and concepts are interwoven so masterfully. It's so mind blowing to me. I personally, I'm a big believer that, because if you throw in the Map of the Soul Persona songs, like, because there were obviously two that weren't included on Mot 7, but if you include all of the Persona songs and then all of the other songs that on Map of the Soul 7 that were new to the album, you can almost, in my opinion, look at it as like 7 songs in each section. So you have 7 Persona songs, 7 Shadow songs, and 7 Ego songs. And then they all just sort of flow together in this really, really cool narrative way. It's very neat. Mind-blowing is a good description. I agree. It's such a beautiful crafted album. Like, I feel like when you look at it, you're just seeing something that was masterfully crafted and carved. We'll definitely talk about Jamais Vu. I'm really excited to talk about some of the individual songs. So yeah, we can definitely get right to the song discussions, because I am very excited to get to that, and you'll have to let me know if my screens show up. So let's start with Intro Persona and see if you guys can see my little Intro Persona screen. Nothing fancy, but just a little something for us to look at while we talk. Oh, I love that description, that the overarching concepts are like candy. That is such a good description. Okay, good. You can see my screen. Awesome. All right, so obviously we're going to be starting with the Map of the Soul Persona songs. I did include Microcosmos and Home as well, even though they're not on Mot 7, they're only on Mot's Persona, but we're talking about everything related to Map of the Soul today, so they're included in there as well. So starting with Intro Persona, obviously that is the first introduction that we get to this concept, because it's what kicks off the Mot's Persona album. And I think it really kind of just perfectly encapsulates what they were looking for with these albums. Because like I said, when they came off of Love Yourself, they really wanted something that was introspective. And to begin the whole series with the question of who am I, and the concept of self, and how your true self and your true identity is shaped. I think Namjoon was such a good choice for that, and Intro Persona as a song just really, really gets to the core of that. It's so good. Every time Persona plays, I'm always like, please rise for the national anthem of the United States of Bangtan. Come on, let's go. The president is singing. And he explores so many questions about the self and questions about identity that I think a lot of people have. You know, where's your soul? Where's your dream? I just think so many of the things that he discusses are not only really central to him, but they're just universal questions that everybody can relate to. And I just, the way he digs into those concepts, even in such a short song, because Persona is not very long, but he captures so much of it in the song so masterfully. And it's just so interesting to me. I think a lot of what Namjoon discusses in his songs are usually like looking for kind of balance and harmony, and that's so much a Persona theme. And it's just, you know, he's kind of looking to balance his creativity and his music, and all of that. He's looking to balance it and give that creativity to people without being overwhelmed and without losing himself. And that's something that I really relate to as a creative person. And so he really gets to the core of it. Yeah, I agree. Me too. Asking, what is my purpose? That's a big question for me as well. I think a lot of people can relate to asking, who am I? What was I meant to do? Why am I here? Why are any of us here? And kind of like we were saying about the album as a whole, those are very intense concepts. And I just am so interested by how he manages to unpack them in just really skilled ways. He is a seeker. I agree. And I think it's really special to be brought on that journey as well with, through his music. And I think it's really interesting too, the fact that he sort of sampled a song from School Love Affair. And like we were just talking about Boy With Love, which obviously will be the next song we talk about too, and how Boy With Love kind of represents sort of a more matured version of who they were in School Love Affair. And so it's really interesting to me that he took the intro for School Love Affair and made it a very integral part of the beat and the melody of Persona. There's a lot of, I love the introspectiveness of it. And it's kind of special to me. And this is something that I love about BTS, and one of the things that made me an ARMY in the first place. Kind of like I discussed last week, my first thing that really made me an ARMY was actually the speech at the United Nations that he delivered on behalf of the group. And it was always very fascinating to me that, I live a very, very different life from RM of BTS. We are two different genders. We're two different, nationalities. We're very similar in age. I'm only a year younger than he is. So, we have that in common, but it's like different languages, different cultures, but he still goes through the same things that I'm going through. Even though he is, this famous, beloved celebrity, he still is going through a lot of issues that I can relate to. And I'm going through a lot of issues that he talks about in his music. And I always think that's really special about BTS, is that even when there are differences between us as ARMY and them as BTS, our idols, they still understand us and we understand them. And it's so meaningful that we all kind of share that commonality. It's very, and I think Intra Persona, I think, really proves that we all tend to ask ourselves the same questions, and that we all sort of go through those same struggles. And that to me is one of the things that makes BTS so special. I love hearing that, Karen. That always, I love seeing ARMYs all over the spectrum of ages and nationalities and genders who can still relate to those messages. We talked about this a little bit in my last live stream. It's something that frustrates me so much when people dismiss them because, they're just a boy band for little girls. And it's just like, that is so not true, because everything that they discuss, people all over the world can relate to. They aren't only focused on concepts that are like very specific to them, or very specific, concepts that a lot of quote unquote boy bands would have focused on. They choose to go deeper. And that's always what has been BTS. All right. So we'll head to Boy With Love. We were just talking a little bit about Boy With Love, and its kind of reboot status. And I believe personally that there is so much depth to Boy With Love. I cannot wait to talk about it and do videos about it, because there is just a lot of depth here that I think is really, really interesting. And overall, it is kind of about returning to like smaller things and finding meaning and pleasure. That is what its Korean title is about. It's a poem for the small things. So it is kind of this beautiful return to kind of what's on the ground. They use a lot of like, one of the many things I love about Map of the Soul Persona is there's a lot of classical Greek themes and imagery in Mott's Persona, and Boy With Love is a great example of that, because we have a lot of mentions of Icarus and flying and things like that. So it's kind of the idea of flying high but still being rooted to the ground, which I think is really cool as well. Oh, yeah, I definitely agree with you. What I love seeing young people connect with BTS as well. It makes me very very happy. I think it's that's one of my favorite things about the fandom is that we can all sort of exist together, whether it's armies who are, you know, preteens or teenagers and armies who are older adults. I think that's really special because very few things kind of bridge the divide like that. You know what I mean? It's not every day that you see something that appeals to so many different age groups and genders and nationalities. And it is very cool that everybody can come together under that banner. I'm always a huge fan of seeing much older armies and much younger armies as well. I think it's very, very special. Boy with Love is the first BTS music video you remember seeing. That is awesome. I saw it pretty early on in my army life as well. I was still kind of getting, you know, still getting my BTS education when I encountered Boy with Love. And I think I might have actually seen it performed before I saw it music video form because I saw the performance that they did on New Year's Eve. It was technically still 2019, but they were ringing in the new year for 2020, and they did it in Times Square, and I saw that after the fact, and saw the video of that performance, and I still watch that performance every year on New Year's Eve, because it's just such a beautiful performance, and it's such a good performance for something like that. I think such a good song for something like that. And then I saw the music video, and I love the music video. It's so sweet. I love all the singing in the rain references. And I think there's just so much depth and meaning packed within the song and the video. You know, I think a lot of times people think it's just kind of like this very light-hearted bubblegum pop, and it you know, it has those elements, of course, but there is so much depth that I can't wait to dig into in a future video because to me there's just a lot to unpack and a lot to love about Boy with Love. And something that I really appreciate, like I said earlier, excuse me, is that they still would perform Boy in Love while they were also performing Boy with Love. And I just really think it's great that they show that evolution with the two songs side by side, because Boy in Love is still a great song. It's just great to see how the concepts evolved into Boy with Love. And I love that element. All right, so into Microcosmos. This is one of those screenshots from the 2019 MMA. Not the best screenshot, but we won't be lingering on it that long, so it's okay. So Microcosmos, combination of microcosm and cosmos. So it's a combination of the very, very small and the very, very large. And kind of really delving into the idea that everybody has like an inner life and, you know, their own universe. Like everybody has their own sort of complex universe. And everybody sort of goes through struggles, you know, that are both unique and universally understood. And this song is very comforting to that, which I think is very sweet. I love that they, you know, that acknowledgement of everybody's uniqueness, but also the commonality among everybody is very cool. And then Make It Right. I love this picture. I found this one online. It looks like this is from one of the Love Yourself concerts, I think, just based on their shirts. And it's just such a cute image. So Make It Right is next on Persona, and it's really interesting. We'll talk about Home next, obviously, but there is a lot of connection between Make It Right and Home in a way that I think is really, really cool. It's actually something that Namjoon discusses in his broadcast, where he says, because there's a lot of lyrics in Make It Right about not being welcome and being a wanderer and like wandering on the journey. And so he says that the theme of the two songs is that the person who wasn't welcome in Make It Right goes back home. So it's connected to home in a really cool way. And I also kind of, if you've watched my video about the on story video. I think that a lot of that almost has like a sort of wandering journey motif as well. You know, it very much seems like they're kind of outsiders who come to new places. And I think that kind of the idea of being a wanderer that is introduced in Make It Right kind of, I think, really comes to fruition in On. And it has this very neat sort of classical journey vibe of just like the wandering hero, which is very cool. And then perfectly into Home, since like Namjoon said, the wandering person in Make It Right comes home, and they very much, you know, like to say that home is army. And I think that this song really speaks to that in a really sweet way, that there is that safe space between BTS and ARMY. And I think that's always very true. You know, we were just talking in the chat about, you know, that feeling of being made fun of for being an ARMY. And so it's like we know what it's like to have home with BTS. They know what it's like to have home with us, and how we kind of feel safe with each other because we feel understood. All right, so Jamais Vu. I know we had a couple of requests to talk about Jamais Vu, and I will gladly talk about this song. This is a terrific song, and I was curious when I first listened to, you know, first started getting into Map of the Soul, what a Jamais Vu was. So of course I had to look it up, and it's the opposite of Deja Vu. So with Deja Vu, you feel like an action you've never done before feels weirdly familiar. And with Jamais Vu, it's an action you've done before feeling foreign, almost like you've forgotten about it. And somebody had mentioned, I believe it was what had mentioned, that it is indeed, there's like a medical condition as well. It describes a disorder that can sometimes be like a brain disorder where you have that sensation of you've done this, but you don't remember it. And so in the song Jamais Vu, they're kind of using that description to mean, you know, kind of continually failing at the same thing and continually trying again. And it's a perfect song for Jin to be featured on, because in the song they use the metaphor of gaming and like losing a game and starting over. And we all know that Jin loves gaming. So it makes sense that he would be here singing about the gaming themes, like having a continual game over and needing to start again and things like that. So the gaming metaphor to go along with the Jamais Vu metaphor is a really interesting link. I think it's very cool. And there's a lot of Jungian elements that are in here as well, because a lot of it is about kind of the mental process of, you know, kind of breaking out of the same mistakes and the same errors and things like that. So there's a lot of interesting Jungian elements too. And our next song is Dionysus. So we are actually almost out of Map of the Soul Persona and back into Map of the Soul 7. So it's hard to believe that much is contained just in the 7 songs of Persona, and we haven't even gotten into Shadow or Ego yet. What do you guys think so far? I love seeing all of your comments in the chat just about kind of what the songs mean and different things about that. Anything else too that if you wanted me to sort of zero in on, like we had mentioned Jamais Vu, if there's anything else you wanted me to zoom in on, let me know. Oh good, I'm glad everybody's enjoying themselves so far. All right, we'll pop into Dionysus, which sports an image from their 2019 MMA performance of this song, which if any of you haven't seen this performance of Dionysus, please do yourself a favor and go see that. Oh, so for Jamais Vu, the effect of forgetting and connected to I'm just hopping back to Jamais Vu for a sec, how that's connected to the idea of like the remedy that they discuss in the song's lyrics. So something that is talked about a little bit in Murray Stein's book, and like I said, take everything I'm about to say with a grain of salt because I don't know anything about psychology other than what I learned in this book. What he mentions in that book is it's kind of like you're not learning from your failures, you know? So in this song, they use the gaming metaphor, and they talk about having like repeated game overs and stuff. So it's just like, if you keep making the same mistake and you keep failing over and over again, like imagine if you kept making the same mistake in a video game type of thing. And so in Jungian psychology, when you don't learn from experience and you make the same mistake over and over again, it sort of starts to become a complex. And a complex, because you're not learning from your past mistakes, it starts to become like an issue for yourself. It becomes an issue for the people around you. And so that's very much a thing in the song of just, even though they're using that gaming metaphor, exactly, don't feed the bears, it's about escaping that cycle. So in Jamais Vu, they're sort of talking about like, this isn't a game. I can't just go back to the beginning and start over. I have to kind of face this reality and figure out how to sort of overcome the cycle. And so a lot of, you know, when they're saying, give me the remedy that will make my heart beat again, they're kind of looking at it and realizing that they're trapped in the cycle and they have to try and do something about it. And I remember in the performance for Jamais Vu that they did in Bang Bang Con the Live, which is where this picture comes from, I remember them saying that their concept was that they couldn't look at each other, so that they, you know, they're always kind of going in a circle and they're never, you know, and I feel like you could even maybe say that all three of them could represent like a past, present, and future thing, and they're never looking at each other, and they're always just kind of going in a big circle. And they're hoping for that remedy that will kind of let them break out of the cycle and will give them what they need. It's, you know, please give me a remedy, give me a way for my heart to beat again. And so I think it's the desire to kind of improve your actions and get a better outcome is how I've always interpreted it. Right? One song can mean so much. It's so crazy. Also, hello to everybody who just joined. Hi, Summer. I hope you're doing well today. I hope everybody's having a good, right now for me it's afternoon, but I hope you guys are having a good whatever time of day it is for you. Good evening, good good morning, whatever the case may be. All right, so let's pop back to Dionysus. I agree with the people in the chat who are saying it is such a good performance of this song. And Dionysus is one of my all-time favorites. Just I love the theme, I love the messaging. And when Namjoon described the kind of the flow of Map of the Soul Persona, he definitely described it as kind of like a journey where you're wandering through, and then Dionysus is sort of the end goal, and where you end up after the wandering journey. And Dionysus, for Greek mythology is another thing that I'm not an expert on by any stretch of the imagination, but I've always been interested in Greek mythology ever since I was a kid. And Dionysus, for those of us who are Greek mythology obsessed like me, he is the Greek god of wine and revelry. And the song plays with the metaphor that whenever they talk, because the Korean words for art and alcohol are very, very similar. So the theme of the song is basically that art can kind of have the same effect on people as alcohol. And so it's really interesting that they're setting themselves up as the gods of alcohol, but what they're actually saying is kind of the idea of we're like the gods of like art and getting intoxicated on art. And I think that's really cool. When you were, I'm really interested in your question about like the real-time hype. Are you referring to Dionysus? I admit I was a little bit late as well. because I became ARMY in early 2020. So I kind of missed, like, I didn't get to see like the 2019 like MMA performance happen. I only saw it after the fact. And some of that. So I also kind of missed some of the real time hype for Dionysus. So I'm curious if anybody else kind of has any like experience with it or any thoughts about it. Because I know also this was how they opened up when they did the Love Yourself, Speak Yourself concerts, and they put some of the Persona songs in with the Love Yourself songs. I know this is how they opened up those concerts. And I'm very jealous because I would have loved to see Dionysus be performed live because this song is incredible. And so I'm curious, does anybody else have kind of some experience with when Dionysus first came out? Yeah, I run into the same thing as you. Don't feed the bears. I tend like I was kind of a part of the Mott 7 comeback, kind of, but I was kind of too newly ARMY to necessarily have all of the background. So it's like, so I have some of those issues where it's just like I kind of missed some of the real time hype just a little bit. I with some of the Mott 7 songs, I was part of the hype, like when the music videos came out for On and Black Swan, because those were almost kind of like a little bit more surprise type music videos. And I watched when they were on, like I said, the Tonight Show where they did On in Grand Central Station. I watched that happen. And I watched when they did Carpool Karaoke with James Corden. So like I watched some of those really like iconic interviews and things like that. But even so, I wasn't necessarily present in ARMY spaces. So I did kind of, unfortunately, which is very sad because it is my favorite album in my favorite era, and I didn't really get to share it with anybody, but I still had a lot of fun, and it's still very dear to me because it was a great time to consume content. So I had my own sort of hype all by myself, which I did share with the people around me, of course, but that was rather than be on like ARMY spaces. I wasn't on Weverse yet or anything like that. So hello, welcome to the stream. I'm so glad you're here. Right, I know the first time that I saw the 2019 MMA performance of this song, literally, we had said before, like, mind blowing is a good word to describe, you know, the Mott's era in general, but mind blowing is, I think, the way I would describe, because it's just incredible the way this whole performance just slowly leads up. Because they'd already done, when they did this performance, Namjoon had already done part of Intra Persona. They'd already done Boy in Love, Boy with Love, Microcosmos, and then they did all of those little individual things to kind of build up, like each member had their own little individual kind of dance or thing that they were doing set to some of the other songs. And then all of a sudden, then this performance of Dionysus, which is just so huge. And I just remember just being blown away watching this for the first time. And then I'm still very excited to get you guys my Dionysus video because I just have so many thoughts about the way this song works. I mean, it is obviously a performance masterpiece. And I think every performance of Dionysus has been mind-blowing on some level. But I'm just so excited to dive into why Dionysus is such a good metaphor for BTS, and why like Dionysus as a mythological figure makes so much sense for them. Because when I first heard this song, I thought it was a really interesting choice to pick Dionysus because if, you know, looking at BTS as artists, my sort of initial thought would be to have them be Apollo, like who's the god of music and the god of art and things like that. But it actually makes so much sense for them to be Dionysus. And I'm so excited to talk about it. And yes, Joanne pointing out that J-Hope helped write most of Dionysus. And it's just, I love it. I love what he was able to do with this song. And excuse me, in his live broadcast about it, Namjoon talks about how much he valued J-Hope. I believe he described J-Hope as like a relief hitter and coming in and doing this song for him. And I love that happened, that collaborative spirit. Yes, you're so right, Karen. I remember seeing that in my research for Dionysus. There were myths that said Dionysus came from the east. And they also said that Dionysus triumphed in Asia before he came back to Greece, which I think is really interesting. And there are even some myths that say that people didn't believe that Dionysus was a god, not even people in his own family, which I think is really interesting when, we were talking earlier about how people doubt BTS and doubt us as ARMY. And so it's really, I think, an interesting metaphor to have like this god who was kind of doubted, and I think BTS kind of adopting the idea of Dionysus makes so much sense for them. Yeah, oh, I love that description that like the artistry fulfills us, because that was very much a thing with Dionysus as a mythological figure, was like when you followed Dionysus, like Murray Stein talks about this in the book, sort of like whatever persona you had to adopt to survive in society, following Dionysus let you kind of break that persona down, which is why I think it's really interesting that it ends Map of the Soul Persona, because it's kind of showing you how to break out of your persona mold and go a little crazy. All right, let's pop in. So we're now getting to like the first quote unquote new song in Map of the Soul 7, which is, of course, Yoongi's interlude Shadow. Um, and Shadow is, there's just again so much complexity in Shadow, and it's just such a raw, vulnerable song. I love the depth of Shadow, and how he talks about his own shadow in it, and isn't afraid to kind of embrace the dark element of that, and then talk about how necessary it is to embrace that element. So, very a big thing in the Map of the Soul concept is that the shadow will always be a part of a person, and so it's not about fighting it, it's about kind of acknowledging it and even learning to accept it. And I think Yoongi really goes on that whole journey throughout the song. It's very interesting, and it very much feels in the song like a dialogue between him and the shadow. Like he's kind of, the first part is him, the second part is the shadow, the last part is kind of this back and forth dialogue between the two. And so it's kind of almost like you're trying to accept it, you're trying to integrate it into your own person, and it's a really cool way of showing that. I agree. There is such a visceral element about the song, and I love that in both the music video and when he performed it in Map of the Soul 1, that it's like the hands coming through and there's all these shadowy figures, and it's just it has such a creepy element that is just so, but like so raw and so real. You can really feel what the shadow represents, both in the concept of the Map of the Soul and just like in Yoongi's own life and his own concept. It's so interesting to me. And Shadow makes, I talk all the time about how this album flows together. Having Dionysus flow into Interlude Shadow, flow into Black Swan is so good. Like the flow of going from sort of the intensity of Dionysus into a whole different intensity, excuse me, a whole different intensity in Shadow, and then into Black Swan, which is a song so much about the shadow, is such a good flow and good idea and good continuation of just the storytelling of how you go from persona into shadow. It's, I agree. The artistic expression of the entire album is so amazing. I could talk about Map of the Soul 7 forever, and I will never shut up about Map of the Soul 7. I swear. And obviously, I've done a video about Black Swan's music video already. So I've already talked a lot about Black Swan on the channel already, and I'm definitely going to talk more because I love Black Swan so much. But so I definitely get more in depth in my video about the subject. If you want a little bit more depth on that, I would recommend checking it out. But just kind of like the quick overview of Black Swan. Obviously, the big reference that you see in the idea of like the ideas that they portray in the music video and their performances is the idea of the Black Swan character in Swan Lake. You see that a lot throughout their dancing and things like that. But the idea of a black swan also has this other root that I talk about in my video about it, which is a black swan is basically a surprise major event, which you're not expecting at the time, but then you realize like you can kind of rationalize it away in hindsight and sort of realize maybe you should have been more prepared for it. And then it's also this commentary about how our thinking can be very dramatically altered by events. So, back in the day, they used to think that only white swans existed. And so there was a Latin phrase about how black swans were basically impossible. Like a black swan was a thing that didn't exist, but black swans are real. So once black swans were discovered, it kind of made people realize how fragile that system of thought was, because it was such a huge belief in that these black swans were impossible, but then you find one and suddenly the impossible is possible. And so it's really interesting to kind of add those other meanings into Black Swan, which is a song at its core about like the fear of creative death and losing your passion. And so it's kind of interesting to look at something that's impossible becoming possible. There's kind of a bit of a dark twist to that, but there can also be a little bit of a positive twist as well, because then lyrically the song is all about overcoming that fear and that creative doubt. So in a way you can also say, hey, people might say it's impossible that we keep making music. They might doubt that we keep making music, but we're going to show them that we can. We're going to be as rare as a black swan. It's kind of really interesting. And there's obviously, because it's kind of right after Shadow, it's in the Shadow section of the album, at least in my breakdown. I think you can really see that. So there is a lot of shadow imagery, not just even like the physical shadow. Of course, that's a huge part of the video, but there's a lot of Jungian shadow imagery and discussion in the song, kind of about the self and the exploration of the dark side of the self, and that fear of losing your creative passion and such is very, very big in this. And it does very much feel like very relevant to the idea of Jungian shadow. And then after after Black Swan comes Filter. I've always believed that both Filter and the next song, My Time, are also shadow songs. I think they're in the shadow section of the album, but there's some interesting elements of persona in both Filter and My Time that I think are really interesting as well. And when they did this concept of what a filter is, they're kind of describing like how filters color photos. And if you're doing photo editing, you can edit a photo with a filter. And so when there's, Jimin has the lyrics like, put me over your heart and things like that, I always think of kind of like altering a photograph like that. That's my interpretation of kind of like what a filter is. You're looking through a different color filter. I've also always really been interested as well because, obviously a big part of the song is sort of pick which version of me you want, which feels very Persona-esque, but I also think of it almost as like looking at BTS's discography, you know, and you can jump back and forth very quickly. You can go to the past and watch an old song, and you can jump to the present and watch a newer song. And so you can you know, essentially you're jumping between different versions of BTS. And I think they really get to the core of that. You know, Jimin really gets to the core of that when he's talking about pick whichever me you want in this song, you know, and it kind of has that feeling of jumping back and forth and deciding what fits your mood. I will actually be right back. You guys get. Oops, sorry about that. I'm gonna put you on a BRB screen, and I'll be right back so you can see my pretty new BRB screen. And I'll just be a minute. Okay, back now. Sorry about that. So I'm just catching up on what I missed in the chat. Oh, yes, I like that comment about some of the same imagery in their solo projects. Yes, I've definitely noticed that. And I think in some instances, and I actually am going to talk about this in some upcoming videos. In some instances, I think it would be really easy to say that it's who they are working with, because a lot of their usual directing team, I always get confused because they work a lot with Loopins, but I'm not sure if that is the, like, for lack of a better word, stage name of the director, or if it's the company the director works for. I think it's the stage name of the director. And so I think it would be very easy to say, oh, they work with the same director. The director likes these images. And so that's why these images are included. But I think a lot of the images actually just really speak to what the boys want to say, both in their group work and in their solo work. I think there is some overlap of those concepts. And I think that's really cool. And I love seeing all the discussions in the chat. That makes me really happy. That is so cool. I love that we have like kind of a little community to have conversations about. That's so great. All right, my time. So I like Filter and My Time being side by side because I just feel like they both deal with very, very similar topics and kind of similar feelings. And kind of a lot of what was discussed in Filter about being able to sort of jump back and forth between time periods, that's very much a theme in My Time as well, because it's very much about being like displaced in time, which is just kind of a very interesting thing to be discussing. And we kind of mentioned earlier when we were talking about Jamais Vu, we kind of mentioned the idea of like past, present, and future. And that's very much a thing in My Time is being kind of stuck between past and future, not really having a present. He kind of mentions that in the lyrics of just like feeling like you were in somebody else's tomorrow or feeling like you were stuck in the past and yesterday. And so it's actually, when you think about it, it's actually a very sad concept of just like feeling like you can kind of not ever, find rest in any period of time, which is why it's kind of nice at the end of the song where it switches from feeling stuck like you can't do things to feeling like you will do them eventually. And it's very much like an acknowledgement of how time is passing. It's really interesting. Yeah, that's a great description. Your first response was empathy. And I do feel like, kind of like we were saying earlier, there is so much there's so many personal feelings that go into these songs and so many personal experiences that go into the songs. And I think there's a lot of raw emotion and vulnerability that they share with us in this album. And I love that they weren't afraid to show us some of those more vulnerable sides. And I think Jin puts it really perfectly in Moon of just like, if you look at me, will you see even my painful wounds and my scars? And they say it in Respect as well of just like what if the weak part of myself is revealed because I'm letting you see it. And they obviously felt some worries about that, but they were still willing to do it anyway. And I just think that's really special. I like that description of like two violins playing in unison together to describe Jungkook's voice. That's a really good description. All right, so now we'll move on to what is one of the most underrepresented BTS songs of all time, Louder Than Bombs, one of my personal favorites. I definitely agree. There was an episode of Run BTS where they had ARMY fill out a survey, and it was like, what song do you most want to see performed? And the boys were very surprised when ARMY picked Louder Than Bombs, but I agree with those ARMY. I would love to see Louder Than Bombs performed. And I know Namjoon has said it probably won't happen because it's a very hard song to perform, which I get, but this song is so fantastic and just a little bit forgotten sometimes, and I love it so much. Because very much kind of talking about that vulnerability and talking about those struggles. What I love about Louder Than Bombs is that there is very much an understanding that BTS knows that we struggle as well and that we are vulnerable with them as well. And they kind of know that even when, we're all together and we're, they're performing and we're consuming their content and things like that, there is still a shadow that lurks there. And there is, kind of very real sadness there. And they want to protect ARMY from that. And I just think that's very, very beautiful. Oh, that's a good question. Time, destiny, dreams, things like that. do I think they'll use the themes again when they return? I think they will. Maybe not in the ways that we've seen them, but I do think that those are such universal themes and such they're good metaphors, I think, for a lot of the things that BTS as a group and as individuals tend to emphasize kind of in their music and just in how they see the world. We still don't know what we're going to get for the 10th anniversary of the Most Beautiful Moment in Life series, where I think a lot of those themes were first fleshed out. So I guess we'll kind of see if they give us anything for Most Beautiful Moment in Life that kind of plays with those themes. And returning to Louder Than Bombs, I think one of my favorite things is that there is very much an encouragement to keep sharing our personal stories as ARMY with them. And I think that is something very beautiful that they've always emphasized, even going back to, the Speak Yourself speech, love yourself, speak yourself. It has very much been this emphasis of like, please keep sharing your stories with us and keep speaking those stories, and they'll be, they're offering comfort with songs like Louder Than Bombs. And there's a lot of comfort on this album, I think, and I find that really special. All right. Now, one of my favorite BTS songs of all time, if not my absolute favorite, On. You all know that I love what I call the On story video, but I had to use this image from On Come Prima because it is one of my favorites. Just that shot of them all at the ending position for the song. I love it. On is one of my favorite choreographies, and I just love that part of all 7 of them together. I've talked about On quite a bit in my video about the music video, and have really, gone into the themes in that video, but it always bears repeating because I just love what On represents so much. And we were talking a little bit about it earlier, actually, about kind of how you stay sane. And that's very much a theme in On. It's about how the world is insane and how do you stay sane in an insane world. You go crazy for one thing, and one thing only. And for BTS, it's their art. And that's something that Namjoon discussed a lot in the live broadcast when talking about On is and we see that in the lyrics, gotta go insane to stay sane. And for them, they just talk about how do we focus ourselves? We focus on our art. And it's basically, I've always looked at it as kind of how you face your fears, how you confront your shadow, and how you use that to stay grounded. And the boys themselves have talked about how this song really shows their growth and their powerful energy, and just their sincerity, which I truly believe you can see in On. I think the song itself, the choreography, the performances, the videos, I think in all of those things combined, you can really see how much they've grown, how sincere they are, and how much they want to bring that art to people, and how much they wanted to bring all of those themes together in Map of the Soul 7 and Map of the Soul as a concept. I think you can really see it through On. It's the perfect title track. I think you're not alone there, Bomac. I think a lot of people went crazy for BTS to stay sane during COVID. I myself got very lucky that I discovered them right before COVID, so it's like I was already gonna go down the rabbit hole anyway. That was just inevitable, and I had the perfect excuse. And I think they were what colored a lot of people's quarantine experiences and kind of made that whole thing bearable for a lot of people. All right, so in my interpretation of Map of the Soul 7 as an album, like I said, I think you can very cleanly break it down into 7 songs in each section. And if that breakdown is accurate, this would be the last song of the Shadow section. And the running joke that whenever this song plays, Taehyung goes insane, and he just like loves this song. That is me. I agree. Whenever this song comes on, this song is fantastic. And I too go a little crazy when this song comes on, so I can completely relate to Tae in that regard. I not only is it just such a powerful song, and just full of like so much rap line swag and just exudes power and passion and vibrancy, but the message of this song I think is very, very important, because at its core it is about anger and how that works in the world, and it's a caution against malice-filled anger, and it explores how people are quick to judge and how people can kind of fool themselves into thinking that their logic is the best logic, and that just kind of blind themselves to other people's way of thinking. And it's something that Namjoon even said in his broadcast about the album. Is he talks about how it's difficult to even know ourselves as people, and so it's even more difficult to assume we know what others are thinking or feeling. And I think it gets BTS. Something I always talk about BTS and their themes is that they very often talk about like injustice and unfairness and things like that throughout. Like that was a huge theme in the school era. It was a huge theme in HYYH, and I think there's a lot of it here in UGG, where they just sort of are being angry at malice-filled anger and anger that is destructive and anger that has nowhere else to go, and they almost want to see it change. They wish they could see it change. And I think I mentioned this, we were kind of talking earlier about how we see a lot of these same themes in their solo work, and I think I mentioned this when I did my video to celebrate J-Hope getting out of the military. There's almost a lot of the themes of UGG I think you can see like in some of J-Hope's solo work, like in Stop off of Jack in the Box kind of has a very similar theme of stop jumping right to conclusions and stop jumping right into anger. And so it's really interesting to see how those themes do kind of play into their solo work as well. And then once again, because Map of the Soul 7 has just incredible flow lyrically and song-wise, it flows into 0 o'clock, which seems like it would be a strange choice to go from the intensity of UGG into sort of this nice, cozy, calm feeling of 0 o'clock. But I think it actually makes a lot of sense, because I think UGG almost talks about how sometimes things happen that are outside of our control, and we try and shake it off. We just try and say ugh and go about our business, but how difficult that can be. But 0 o'clock is about the reset that sometimes we need to have, and 0 o'clock means midnight, and so it's the thing that calms us down and shows us that we can try again tomorrow. I agree, Bomac. Thinking of when they did for Festa, when they did karaoke, I always think, whenever I hear UGG, I always think of the Maknaes doing their version of UGG in the karaoke booth and going just totally wild and having a blast singing UGG. Yes, you were so right, Karen. I think when you look at On as well, because On goes right in, gotta go insane to stay sane is the theme of On, and then they go into UGG where they're sort of talking about how irrational the world is, and then go into 0 o'clock and sort of talk about it's okay. You can every day resets at midnight. You can have a chance to try again and to kind of let things go. And it's really interesting to me because we know that obviously when COVID happened, they had to shift their focus and start working on B and Dynamite and some of the other things that we saw post Map of the Soul. But in his live broadcast, when he was talking about Map of the Soul 7, and like COVID was already kind of starting to make its presence known, even when he was talking about the album in this breakdown. When he's talking about 0 o'clock, Namjoon even uses the phrase "life goes on," which we of course know became the title track off of B. So clearly they were already thinking about this concept. And it's just such a beautiful song. It's the vocal I know has such just beautiful songs and comforting songs, and um, I just I love 0 o'clock. It's such a great song. All right, and then for another really beautiful, calm, cozy song, Inner Child, Tae's Inner Child. And the inner child is always kind of represented as a part. Again, I know nothing about psychology, but it's represented as a part that can grow and change. And I like that something that Namjoon mentions is that the original lyrics of this song were "we don't change," and Tae requested that the lyrics actually be "we gonna change." And I think that is kind of adds a positive spin, because he's talking about his inner child as something that is always going to be there, but something that can grow with him, which is really nice. Oh, I like that description, Bomac, that you think of 0 o'clock when you've had like a stressful day and then you can reset. I'm sure they would be really happy to know that that's the idea that Army was taking away from the song, because I think they did want to use that song to offer comfort and to say, hey, it's okay, you can try again tomorrow, you can reset, tomorrow, and the lyrics even say, I hope that tomorrow will be better, and I think that wish, is very, very prevalent, very, very beautiful. Another instance of songs that I think flow really well together when you go from inner child to friends. I think that's a very cute transition. And I love this performance from Bang Bang Con, and that iconic picture of them comparing the size of their pinky fingers. I myself am very short, so I relate to Jimin's struggle with his little pinky finger, because honestly, same. So I can relate. But this song is such a sweet song between V and Jimin, and I love that the lyrics, if you go through the lyrics, they are real events, that they're talking about. We of course have all heard of the infamous dumpling incident that they've mentioned in this song, and that they've mentioned in other things, where they fought about the idea of, do we eat our dumplings now or do we wait until after practice, and how that was like such a small thing, but it became a fight, because of course when you're under stress and you're very, very busy like they were, little things can cause fights like that. So that, I love that they included that in the song and kind of say that it feels like a comedy when they look back on it, because that is just such a friend thing when you look back on something that was a big deal in the past and you're like, why was this a big deal? And I just love those little incidents and those little elements that they mention of their friendship show how real their friendship and their dedication is. And I think you can say that of any of the members of BTS. And I think that's really very special, that the theme of this song is them asking, please stay by my side, even if I'm not, even if we're not famous anymore, even if we're not performing anymore. I hope that we still stay together as a unit. And I think BTS feels that way in general. Something that I also really love about this song, as well is I love that they refer to each other as their soulmates. I'm a huge fan of that concept of basically just being friend soulmates or platonic soulmates. And I think that's really important. We don't see a lot of that portrayed in music, at least that I've seen. And we've seen songs about friendship, of course. Even just within BTS's own discography, we've seen like that's a big theme in Spring Day. But I love that they're not afraid to say, you're my soulmate, and just mean it in this beautiful, dynamic of their friendship. I think that's so cool. And I agree, Karen. I think one of their lessons is you could really look at them and get a lesson on how to maintain friendships, all of them in the group, and just what it's like to have a healthy friend dynamic, which, again, is something that sometimes isn't portrayed too often. And so it's really nice to see. Hitchhiker Hobbit, me too. I am as well. That's something I'm a bit private about. But I'm delighted to see that we are in the same boat together. And I completely agree with you. Platonic relationships are so important to me and so valuable to me. Um, and it's something I always talk about wanting to see more of in media. And so seeing it, yeah, I know, right? That when I saw your comment, I was like, wait a minute. That sounds like the inside of my brain for a second. But yeah, I love looking at these types of relationships. They're so important, not just to somebody like me, but in general, I think they're so important. Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree, Karen. So we were talking earlier about Moon, and here is Moon. We mentioned earlier, and I was talking about how um, the song is so upbeat and so happy, and then you look at the lyrics, and there's so much depth to these lyrics. I'm so happy that Jin has continued to perform Moon, even after like his military service, and has been so has performed it both when he did his Festa showcase right after he got out, and in his showcase for Happy. I'm so glad that he's still talked about Moon and done Moon, because it is such a dear song to me. Tell you more. I will gladly tell you more. I will gladly tell you more about Moon. So there's a couple things with Moon, and I'm not even there's obviously a whole bunch of stuff about Moon mythologically and things like that, but that I could even go into that. But I think just looking at the structure of Map of the Soul 7, talking about how great the songs flow together, I love that Moon comes before Respect, which we'll obviously get to in a minute, but Respect is very much about looking at something over and over again, the re-inspect. And I think that's very much a thing with Moon. So Moon lyrically is very much about like the hidden struggles, and specifically of Jin, but I think any of the members of BTS would agree with, with the struggles, because they've all gone through a lot of these struggles together. And excuse me. So it's about, kind of being this beautiful shining thing that somebody wants to look at. But if you look at it too closely, you're going to start to see, the flaws and the wounds and the hidden hurts and the things that they try and hide. And, the lyrics of Moon, like I said earlier, very much are about, if you keep looking at me, will you start to see my painful wounds? Will you start to see the things that I hide? But also this beautiful devotion as well, so it's, even if I'm scared that you might see those parts of me that I don't want people to see, I'm still going to stay by your side because I think that you are the one who's beautiful. which, you know, the whole song is written as if the moon is looking at the earth. Because, you know, even before BTS, even before this song, I always liked the moon. I'm somebody who really likes nighttime, you know, and I always love, you know, moon watching. And this song kind of flips that on its head a little bit and says, maybe when you're looking at the beauty of the moon, maybe the moon's looking back at you and thinking you're the beautiful one. So it's also very much, you know, a reflection on, and it's so perfect for, you know, when you come off of Epiphany, Jin's song and Love Yourself Epiphany, about looking at like self-worth, and then you come on to Jin's song off of Map of Soul 7 Moon, and it's about self-worth in a new way. It's about, hey, you're beautiful as well, you know, and I want to be there for you and give you comfort in the same way that you think the moon is beautiful, the moon thinks you're beautiful. And I think there is a lot of crossover as well. I mentioned this when I did my video for Jin when he got out of the military, and I talked about the astronaut. I think there's a lot of crossover between Moon and the astronaut in terms of themes of just, you know, finding that person who makes you feel worthwhile and who kind of gives you that love. You know, because that's a big theme in the astronaut of like, you understood me, you know, you became my reason and my the thing that gave me my path. And that's the lyrics of Moon as well, is you gave me a reason to exist, and you made me what I am. And there's also I would love to do a video, like a whole separate video just about this. There is a ton of theming, especially in the live performance that he did in Map of the Soul 1. There is a ton of theming toward about The Little Prince, the book The Little Prince, in ways that I think are really quite interesting. And I actually never read The Little Prince before Moon and all of this, and I'm just like very interested now in just like diving deep into the themes of the book, because there's a lot of complex themes. Right, yes, space and the galaxy are such huge themes in BTS, and I always love that. Microcosmos, like you said, is another great example, even just from this same album. And there's so many references to the stars and the moons and the planets. I had mentioned in my previous live broadcast that one of, you know, basically my favorite song of all time is Namjoon's Moonchild, you know, so there's a lot of, again, we're back in the moon imagery. And I just think that those cosmic themes and those cosmic ideas so beautifully convey a lot of, you know, what they want to say, sort of about cycles and looking at things that are far away, and just a lot of really poignant imagery that fits BTS and ARMY. Yeah, that idea of like you're going from the large to the small, the universal and the personal. So with that being said, talking about looking at something over and over again, respect is very much about that, and looking at something and seeing all of its elements. And the song is at its core about respecting respect as a concept, and really understanding that respect is so valuable. There's even a lyric in the song, I believe it's one of Namjoon's lines, where he says that he almost regards respect as being higher than love, because respect, you know, to keep looking at something and decide that it's worthy and to decide that you want to keep looking at it requires a huge level of commitment. And so the song is about wanting to be respectful truly, and truly mean it, and, you know, give that respect to other people and to respect for yourself as well. I agree. We're talking about Moon, that it was great that he was able to sing, because for so many of these songs they never got to be performed, and I think it was really special that he got to sing those for ARMY when he got out of the military and got to sing Moon. And right, this point in the album, um, pretty much from Ugh onward, I think we're really getting into the ego songs. So I think we're really getting into the songs that are, a more affirmed, more grown version of the self. Are you referring to my what are you referring to my picture here? That is for the picture for Respect on the screen right now is from the performance that they did in Bang Bang Con the Live, and Namjoon was really feeling it. Was really feeling the music, and that part always makes me laugh because he's just hardcore vibe in there. And I'm not quite sure what he's doing, to be honest. He's just having a blast. I always love that performance. It has such cute energy. And he and Yoongi purposely themed it to have like a retro feel, so they're in like really retro outfits. I had to pick like a retro font accordingly to match their vibe. And then for a little bit of mood whiplash, when you go from Respect, the next song, of course, is We Are Bulletproof the We Are Bulletproof the Eternal, aka a song that literally always makes me cry. They did this song, I was talking last week, I saw them day one of PTD in LA, and this was their encore song, and I wept, like literally wept. This song is always so emotional to me. In their press conference for MOT7, the boys did confirm that they look at this as an ego-themed song about going forward even in the face of trials. And it's just very much, when the image on screen is a screenshot from the animated music video that they released for 2020 Festa, and you can very much see that in the video as well of going forward. They literally, their little animated characters go forward through their different music videos and through their different eras and are on concert stages and all of this, and it's such a meaningful song, and I think it'll always be a very special and meaningful song, and such a unique way to round out the We Are Bulletproof songs in such an unexpected way. I agree. Yep, Christine, so many tears. Oh man. And it made me emotional. It always made me emotional even before that concert. But after that concert, it's like I will cry forever when I. Oh, that is so cool, Hitchhiker Hobbit. Oh, I love that. That is so cool. And what a fun hobby as well, painting pottery. And then more mood whiplash to end Map of the Soul 7 is, of course, outro Ego, which brings the energy back up and is such a good way to end the album. Earlier in the broadcast, I mentioned how they sample a lot of the earlier songs, and I mentioned that Ego samples their first debut trailer. And so in a way, I really feel like Ego brings everything back around full circle, just beginning to end, is very, very cool. Oh, and you're very welcome, Sonia. I'm very happy to explain the album and explore it a little bit. It's timeless. It's one of my favorites. I love going through it. Like I said before, I'll never get tired of talking about this album. But yeah, and the lyrics of Ego in general as well, there is a lot about moving forward, and that's very much present in the music video, moving forward and, not stopping, and kind of this promise to continue forward. It's very, very cool. Hi, T-Style, welcome back. Yes, it was, oh my gosh, it was so intense. I have recordings from that concert. I took video on my phone, and I don't think I will ever let another living human see my recording of We Are Bulletproof the Eternal, because like I said, I was literally sobbing. I had been through a lot that year. It was, like literally just right before that concert even, I'd been going through a lot of personal stuff. And so to go to the concert and just like have this amazing time, and then to be just hit full force with the emotions of We Are Bulletproof the Eternal was so intense. It was unbelievable. In the best possible way, but yeah, I was sobbing. It was beautiful. It was incredible. Thank you so much for being here, Karen. And I hope that you can catch up on what you missed when it goes up on the channel. I'm going to be talking about music videos and stuff next, so we'll be doubling back a little bit to talk a little bit more about the songs we already discussed, but I'm so glad you had a nice time. I'm so glad that you were here. Yeah, that's right. They did keep picking Ego when they did their karaoke. it was Namjoon and Jin, right? I have a mental image of them jumping up and down. If I can, if I figure it out and I figure out that we can watch like videos together on here, and it won't be a problem, we should honestly watch the karaoke because it's so great. No worries at all, T-Style. No worries. I know that some people have been listening podcast style today, so that is not a problem. I'm so glad that it's been fun though, and that it's been interesting. I do my best. I know sometimes I'm literally scrolling through like my notes document as I'm talking, and it's crazy how many notes I have for this album. So a lot of it is just me trying to cherry pick a little bit so I'm not just throwing out every bit of information. No worries at all. Yeah, for the people who are just kind of listening, that is no problem. All right. So since we'll discuss, I think we had been discussing a little bit earlier about whether or not we can show the videos. I think for now we'll just discuss them. I only have about 45 more minutes anyway, so we'll just sort of talk about it. And then we'll, maybe in future, maybe we can watch some videos together. I have to do a little bit more research on that. This is only my second live broadcast, so I was actually even having trouble even figuring out, like if I put them on screen, if you guys could hear them. So we'll work it out one step at a time. But for now, we'll just talk about the music videos and not actually watch them. But if that is ever something you'd like to do in futures, like we watch videos together and comment on them real time, I'll definitely figure out how to do it for future. But so jumping back up to Intro Persona, which is of course, the first music video that we get for the Map of the Soul era and the Map of the Soul concept. And this picture is actually the one that I have on screen was a picture that was used in conjunction with Map of the Soul 1. They released some photo books after that live stream concert, and they did a bunch of promo images for everybody's solo songs. So that's what this is from, but it is kind of a good approximation of like what he would have been wearing in the music video. And so the image kind of really works to highlight what the themes are of the video as well. So a lot of the video takes place in a room, like a school room. And it is really interesting that everything in the room is like a mess or destroyed or deliberately really chaotic. And I find it interesting as well because like we were saying earlier, this song samples the intro off of School Love Affair. So it's kind of interesting to bring back that school imagery and have it kind of deliberately be a mess. It reminds me a little bit of like their first trailer for No More Dream, where they come in and they kind of like mess up the chalkboard, and it has that same energy of just going back to that school era, but in a very, very different way. And it's all in a very different light now, which I think shows that growth that we were talking about before. Something I really love about the music videos for Persona, Shadow, and Ego is there's actually a lot of like thematic overlap between them. So you can look and see things, different thematic things in each video. And one of those things a lot of times is they are either shown to be larger than life or they're shown to be in very high up places. And Persona kicks it off really well. We have that sort of big, larger than life. I like to call it Android June. It's in like a hooded cloak and it has very, artificial looking eyes. So I always call it the Android June. And I think that really is a good visual indicator of that larger than life status that we also see in the other rappers' music videos in other ways. But there's a lot of robots, mannequins, androids, just things like that in this music video, the music video for Intrapersona. And I think that's really interesting when we're talking about personas, to have these sort of, artificial life forms. Because I think it's almost an examination of what is real versus what is artificial. Can you be real and not robotic? And I think that's something that, and he plays with that even in the live performances of it as well. And it's a really interesting concept to me of, very much a mask idea, which is all about what, Persona is all about masks, because that's what a persona is. It's like a Greek theater mask. And so I think having these artificial life forms like robots and androids, it is kind of an interesting form of wearing a mask. And I love the way that's portrayed. It's very visceral in all of his performances and music videos. It's such a cool element. So then the next music video is, of course, Boy With Love. And Boy With Love, I think, is up to 1.8 billion views now or something. It's incredible. And I think there's a lot of depth, like I said earlier, in Boy With Love that I think is really fantastic. Visually, we had mentioned earlier, there's a lot of visual similarities to the movie musical Singin' in the Rain. And it basically kind of conveys the idea of dancing through the storms of life. And they even used umbrellas in a lot of their 2020 performances, like in Bang Bang Con and Map Episode 1. They both did umbrellas and had some fun tricks with the umbrellas as part of their choreography. So that was a fun callback to Singin' in the Rain as well. And there's just a lot of callbacks in general to previous eras. They have their album titles up at one point near the end, and just a lot of different thematic elements as well from previous albums. There's a lot of stuff from Wings that's kind of central to Boy With Love. Again, we kind of see some Icarus stuff. It's very cool. Oh, that's a really good question, Sonia. So I think it depends. A lot of times, so the question is, do we know how much the members had a say on the narrative direction? I know in certain instances, like later when we talk about On, the members have basically said, even, we were given kind of a concept, we were given a story, even we're a little confused. And so there are obviously, a lot of people involved in the making of those music videos, and it's a huge collaborative process. And a lot of these ideas are coming from their producers and the directors of the videos and things like that, and they're being essentially given these concepts. I'm not sure, when we talk about specifics, like, for instance, Intrapersona, I'm honestly not sure how much input Namjoon necessarily had in what was being shown visually on the screen in his videos. But I would be willing to bet that they probably have at least, some input or some idea. And I believe that because they've worked with a lot of the directors that they do work with for such a long time, that the directors do understand them and their message and what they want to say. So even if the members themselves aren't necessarily saying, this is what I want to show on screen, or this is what I want to have, playing behind me, I do think that the collaborative process that they go through really understands their message really well. So even if they don't have a lot to say, I do think that in a way they do have that say over what goes on. And I do think they like giving us music videos that kind of feed our ability to theorize. Again, they said that in On. They're like, we always like seeing what your theories are, and, tell us all your theories about what's going on. So I think they like making videos that kind of yield that result. Speaking of which, next music video that we get is, of course, Interlude Shadow. And these were basically the Rapline music videos were done as almost like concept trailers for the albums for Persona and for Seven, and I think they do that job really, really well. The picture for Boy with Love. Hang on, we have to pop back up there for a sec. Right? That looks like it could be a toothpaste ad, right? They all look so pretty, such beautiful smiles. And you're very welcome, Sonia. I hope I know that was a meandering answer, and I wish I had a better one, but I hope that was a good answer. But so popping down here to Shadow's music video, I had mentioned earlier some of those creepy elements we had been talking about, how visceral a lot of the imagery in Shadow is. And I think the music video is such a good example of that. There is so much in the music video that is just so visceral. And, the fact that so much of it is Yoongi getting chased or dragged down, or, constantly sort of pursued, I think is a very interesting way of portraying the Shadow. Because it very much feels like internal pressures and external pressures, and all of them coming together. And I've always sort of felt like the look of the music video almost reminds me like it's being portrayed as if it's happening inside of Yoongi's head, like it's the inside of his mind, which kind of makes all of that, even more visceral to imagine that like all of these shadowy figures are inside his own head. Then the next music video is, of course, Black Swan. Both the videos for Black Swan and then the On Story video were a little bit of like surprises. I remember at the time when I got into Map of the Soul 7 and was like going through the journey of that, I remember thinking, I really wish Black Swan and On had music videos. And then I had found them kind of by accident because, like I said, I wasn't really involved in army spaces at the time. So when I just kind of found them randomly, and I'm like, they do have music videos now. They kind of came out a little bit, after some of the other stuff. And it was because on Kame Prima had been out first, I believe. And so that it was like a very, very cool video. You got to really appreciate their choreography. But I'm like, man, I really wish it had a music video the way Blood, Sweat, and Tears has a music video and things like that. And was not disappointed between Black Swan and On, which we'll talk about a bit later. But Black Swan is, if you're going just based on the order of the album, the video flowing right from Interlude Shadow into Black Swan is so thematically on point. So many shadow and mirror images and glass images and stuff in Interlude Shadow, and then you have even more of it in Black Swan, which I discuss a lot in my Black Swan music video theory that I did. And you can see so much of the white and the black and the light and the shadows, and the aesthetic of that throughout their dances and their movements in this video are just stunning. I so know what you mean. Don't feed the bears. I was very out of the loop back then because I just started, so It was a surprise one night to while I was scrolling through YouTube to just come across these videos, especially this one. I remember I hadn't known that they dropped a video for Black Swan, and it was like very late at night. It was like I'm a night owl, so I'm always up late, and it was like 1 o'clock in the morning or something, and I was like, what? This video for Black Swan was posted like 2 days ago. How did I miss this? And I immediately had to, jump on and watch it, and it's just stunning. Yes, oh my gosh, I agree. The visually gorgeous for Black Swan, and just all of the shadow movements are so interesting. I love watching everything that's going on with the shadows throughout that. And there's just so many cool little elements that if you watch the video enough, you'll pick them out. One of my favorites, I don't remember if I talked about this in my video or not, but one of my favorites is the scene where Jin is looking in all of the mirrors and he turns around to face the camera, but all of the images in the mirror stay exactly the same. And it's just this very cool moment. It's like, it's so blink and you'll miss it because it literally only happens for like a second, but it's this cool feeling of like the reflections and the shadows kind of almost being like their own separate entity, like they have a life of their own. And it has this very creepy, visceral feeling, but it's stunningly gorgeous at the same time. And I love that Black Swan is a song about art, and then the music video is art in and of itself. And the theater that it takes place at is so beautiful. And the dancing is so incredible. It's beautiful. And I think we get the theme of the song of sort of trying to embrace that fear and that uncertainty of creating, and becoming a Black Swan. Yes, Bomac, the Black Swan art film is amazing, and it has even more of that visceral feeling. It's so raw, and just it is almost unsettling because it is so dark, but it's so beautiful, and that orchestral arrangement is so beautiful that plays over the Black Swan art film. I love that orchestral arrangement. Yeah, I know what you mean. It is hard to look away because the focus is on Jin in that moment. But yeah, if you look behind him, the mirrors are very cool. It took me very many watches of Black Swan to finally realize that. So let's move on to On. So, like I said, I have the image from Come Prima here, but I'm going to be talking about what I call the story video. So the more narrative-driven music video, which I do have a whole video on, where I talk endlessly about all of the themes. But oh, hello, AK. It's good to see you again. I'm glad you're here. So, like I said, I've talked a lot about On, and kind of my interpretations of the story video. And as I discuss in my video on the subject, I have always sort of interpreted the story video as being about coming to a new land and finding that it's hostile, and having to sort of kind of survive in this hostile world, and protect the people around you and overcome the hardships, and essentially in the end basically turn pain into hope, which is my thumbnail for that video, is the bring the pain online, but instead of pain I wrote hope, because I just very much believe that's the theme of the song and the video, and very much at the core of who BTS is. We were talking earlier in the stream about how often they're disrespected, how often we as ARMY are disrespected. And I think On very much gets to the core of that, about how much they have been, pushed aside, and how much people have tried to limit them, and how they have still kind of pushed forward, and sort of attempted to win the battle, even when they get pushed aside. And I think you can really see that in the video. There's just so much symbolism in the video that I didn't even really get to talk about fully when I did my video on the subject, because there is just so much. Exactly. Yeah. Grit your teeth and keep moving. I absolutely think that is a perfect description of On. And I know when they did the Tonight Show Subway interview, and we're talking about On, Namjoon even said, like, bring the pain. We can withstand it, and we'll push forward. All right, so circling back around to We Are Bulletproof the Eternal, even though they had released this as more of like a little thing for Festa, I still look at this as a beautiful music video, because it's like we had said earlier, it does a beautiful job of just spanning past, present, and future, and all of these different references. Yes, talking about On and the loop again with the opposite of no, and it ends with dream for no more dream. I love that part of On, and just the beauty of pulling in those previous themes, from their early work. And no is very much a song about kind of resistance and standing up in the face of trials, and On is a beautiful adaptation of that, and again, like a more mature stance on that. And I love No. It's probably one of my favorite of their older songs, and so then I love kind of bringing that theme back for On. And I actually didn't, I only mentioned briefly the We Are Bulletproof songs. I kind of briefly mentioned them here, but there's a lot of beautiful references from We Are Bulletproof Part 2 actually here in We Are Bulletproof the Eternal as well, in a way that's very, it can be very sad, but it's very meaningful too. There are lines about, like, in We Are Bulletproof Part 2 about sharpening your sword, and kind of like that very intense, powerful stance. And it's a lot more subdued and a lot more sad here in We Are Bulletproof the Eternal, and kind of acknowledges that, they've really gone through struggles. We as Army have really gone through struggles. But it's just a different form of being bulletproof, really. Yes, you're so right, Sonia. I always think of that when he says, when Jimmy Fallon talks about hugging JK after their on Grand Central Station performance, and can feel the fact that he can feel his heart pounding through his back. You can see whenever they do the choreography for On, and you can just see how heavily they're breathing afterwards. They really do bring the pain on, and they just do such a punishing but intensely beautiful choreography. It is such a cool choreography. And I'm always so impressed whenever I watch them do that, especially with the dance break. It's wild. And I totally agree, Don't Feed the Bears, what you said about kind of the theme of On being inspiring yet realistic. And I think a lot of what they managed to accomplish in Map of the Soul 7 is to have that kind of hopeful but real vibe, which is very cool. And I think it applies to We Are Bulletproof the Eternal as well. When you think about We Are Bulletproof Part 2, it is so self-assured and it's so swag, and that made sense, very much for their personas and who they were in their earliest days, and what they believed in their earliest days. And then we are looking at what that looks like after, years of both hardship and triumph, and, both success and failure, and what they've gone through. And so, like I said, it just feels like a different form of being bulletproof. Back in the day, back in We Are Bulletproof Part 2, being bulletproof kind of was like this very cool thing. It was a very, tough thing. And then here in We Are Bulletproof the Eternal, it's a little bit sadder, but also maybe a little bit more meaningful. It's a little bit more protective, and a little bit more, we all came together and we all kind of know how to take the bullets now. And then our last music video is, of course, the video for Outro Ego, which is in a way a little bit similar to We Are Bulletproof the Eternal, the way that video shows kind of all these references to other music videos and their past, the same thing happens in the beginning of Ego, where there's like a little bit of a montage, and it shows how J-Hope progressed and moved forward over the years. Yes, you're so right. Don't feed the bears. Maturity, understanding, acceptance. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like so much of how we see this album progress is very much an acknowledgement of where they started from and how they matured into their current identities. And, you know, Namjoon has mentioned that as well, of just how much it is their story and how they progressed and their beginning and end. And I think you can absolutely see it. You can absolutely see how they have evolved and grown, and what their experiences have done for their art, how it's colored their art in really interesting ways. Yeah, We Are Not Seven with You. When, oh my gosh, the amount of tears that I cried listening to that song. And like I said before, I think Ego coming, like bringing us back to the beginning, you know, kind of going that full circle journey, it makes it really appropriate to come after We Are Bulletproof the Eternal, you know, and to bring us back to that. And it is such a beautiful way to end the album and to, you know, to bookend that story, to begin it with Intra Persona, with Who Am I? And to end it with Ego, of saying, that's my ego. This is who I am. This is what I've been through. This is what I've been through doubts. I've been through fears. I've been through struggles, but I know who I am. And, you know, this is who I choose to be. And of course, I mean, J-Hope is, I think, the perfect person to represent that concept and to bring the energy that song needs. And there's a very heavy theme of only being able to go forward. Like, you can't go back, you can only go forward. And I think that is so beautifully delivered in this video. There's a lot of forward movement in the video. Like when he's driving through the city, and there's a whole bunch of references on like the signs that he passes, and it's all about keep going forward towards your dreams and your hopes, and, you know, don't go back. The map of your soul is forward if you keep going forward. It's poignant, even though it's such an upbeat song. It's like so happy and uplifting in the lyrics, but there's still like a huge amount of poignancy just in the message as J-Hope delivers it, and he is the perfect person to deliver it. And it's such a fun video. I always love the video for this. And like I said at the beginning, of course, we know this wasn't the end of BTS's story like they were maybe considering it would be back in 2020. We know we've had so many things since Map of the Soul 7, but I really just love Map of the Soul 7. I think kind of like I mentioned a little bit in my last broadcast that sometimes I think Wings falls through the cracks because it's in between HYYH and Spring Day and then Love Yourself. Sometimes I think it can be easy to lose hold of Map of the Soul a little bit because just COVID and the way that timeline had to change, and a lot of these songs didn't get to be performed and things like that. But I think there's a lot of echoes that Map of the Soul has throughout. You know, it's been 5 years, but I think over the past 5 years we've been able to really see and appreciate the themes of Map of the Soul even more. And I hope at least that its legacy will, you know, be able to sort of transcend the unfortunate circumstances of what happened to it. I will always be sad that we didn't get to see Map of the Soul 7 performed as we should have. And I still really wish that they would do a Map of the Soul tour, even though I know they won't. I still really wish they would. But I do think that there is a lot of legacy behind Map of the Soul 7 that I think we can still appreciate, and that still gives us a lot of lessons about BTS as a whole. Namjoon himself even said in his broadcast breaking down the album, he basically said, whatever you want to know about BTS, and obviously he was talking, at the time 2020, so a lot has changed in 5 years, but whatever you want to know about BTS, you'll find it in Map of the Soul. And I completely agree. I think so many of their themes, so many of their concepts, so many of what they, the things that they discussed earlier in their careers, they exist here in Map of the Soul 7. And I think that's really, really special. And I think that's in addition to the fact that it's personally very important to me because it coincided with when I became an ARMY. I think it's just important to me as an ARMY in general because it has so much of them in it. And I just think it's very important. Also, no worries at all. Anybody who, missed part of it, beginning or end or middle, anything like that, no worries at all. Just like with my first one, this live stream is going to be up on the channel to watch afterwards. So if you missed anything, no worries at all. I agree. It is the gift that keeps on giving. It really is. There's just something... I love that this album is both comforting and challenging at the same time. Anybody else have any other final thoughts or anything that maybe you didn't get to say while I was talking? Because you know me, I'm a motor mouth. So if there was anything else that you maybe didn't get to bring up or wanted to discuss about the songs, please let me know. I'm going to hop us back up to, no, not that starting. There we go. Just our little starting screen here, which was, originally this picture was the list of things that they were revealing and back when Map of the Soul 7 was being released. So, but yeah, if there's anything else you guys want to discuss or are thinking about in regards to Map of the Soul, please let me know. And I will be making a video about this at some point. So thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoyed. And yeah, everybody in the chat, everybody's thoughts were awesome. It was so cool to see how you guys relate to the songs and the videos and sort of your experiences. Yeah, it's been a while, I think, for a lot of us since we've watched some of the Map of the Soul era music videos. And so I hope that this was a good trip down memory lane and kind of inspired a lot of us to go back and rewatch some of these videos. There's so much. They're great. I have, to answer Sony's question, I have videos for Black Swan and for On. I haven't touched on Intrapersona or Interlude Shadow, Outer Ego. I think I probably will do a video at some point where I look at all three of those together just because I do think there are so many similarities. So I'll probably do those as a unit at some point. And I haven't done Boy With Love yet or some of those other ones, but I absolutely do. I do have videos planned for Boy With Love because I just really want to talk about that song. So. Oh, good. I'm so glad that you have an even more appreciation for Map of the Soul after this. Yeah, it's really fun. Theorizing is great. I would theorize even if there was nobody to theorize to because it's just what I love to do for BTS. But I love being able to share all of those thoughts with everybody here and hearing your thoughts about it. It's just really neat to see how other people interpret the songs as well. And, everybody's background kind of, I think, creates different understandings for songs and how they relate to songs on a personal level. So that's really cool as well to be able to share all of that, together and see what everybody else thinks. Yes, I had mentioned a little bit before about The Little Prince and how that wasn't a book that I read in my childhood or anything like that. It only really came to I knew of it, but I hadn't read it. But it came to my attention primarily through how much Moon relates to its themes. And I really want to dive into that as well because it's really fascinating to me. Thank you very much. Thank you for enjoying my excitement. I like I said, I get a little motor mouthy. I It's always been a flaw of mine that I talk very fast. And when I get excited about topics, and we've been going for about 2 hours and 45 minutes, and yeah, that says it all. When I get excited about a topic, I can literally just talk people's ears off. So I love that you guys are enjoying that, and that we can have two-way discussion, and it's not entirely just me running my mouth for 2 hours. Anybody else have like any other final thoughts, any other questions? I figure we'll start wrapping this up, start saying our goodbyes. But if anybody else had anything else they wanted to add or anything they wanted to ask, please feel free. Yeah, I tend to watch YouTube pretty fast as well, Hitchhiker Hobbit. So at least you're used to my like the fast rhythm of my talking. Yes. So the question of am I looking forward to the return of HYYH for their 10-year anniversary? I am. I'm really, really curious. I Because of when I became an army, I didn't have the same like exposure and visceral reaction to HYYH that a lot of armies who have been here since the beginning had. But I think HYYH is so foundational. It's so important. I would love to do a live broadcast like this one. I would love to do one for HYYH when we get closer to the anniversary, so we can really go through and just analyze everything. Because I there's so much in the BTS universe we could talk about, and there's a lot of stuff. You are so welcome. Everybody who's saying thanks, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you enjoyed. Thank you. I'm so glad you were here today, Christine. You're so welcome. And thank you. I'm so glad you had fun today. I'm not sure when my next live broadcast will be. Like I said, I definitely want to do one for HYYH. But I would like to do one before then. So maybe we'll have just another one where we chat or something. But when you watch the replay of my live stream, you can speed me up, and it'll probably be like listening to a chipmunk because I'll be talking fast and then I'll be sped up. So to answer the question of when HYYH's anniversary is, so technically the Most Beautiful Moment in Life Part 1 came out on April 29th of 2015. So I'm assuming that when they say, oh, we're going to be doing something for the 10-year anniversary, that it would probably be in April. Most Beautiful Moment in Life Part 2 came out in late November. So I'm thinking it would probably make more sense to do something in April to kind of bridge the gap, between now and when they get out. But we haven't seen anything about it, so maybe they will wait until November. I'm not sure. And I don't even think we know what the parameters of that project are, just that there is going to be some sort of project. So to answer the question, I'm not going to one of Hobie's concerts. They just didn't really sort of match up with, anywhere that it was super convenient for me to get to, unfortunately. And I'm definitely saving up for wherever hopefully the boys go when they get out. So unfortunately I have to save a little bit. I don't know, is anybody in the chat, did any of you guys get tickets to any of Hobie's concerts? Also, I was just catching up on the chat from when I was talking, and I completely agree with you. Don't feed the bears. Just losing my mind as it approaches. I strongly agree. Oh, you're going to the one in Chicago. That's awesome. Yes, I hope so too. I know ticket buying can be a little bit crazy, but I hope that a lot of you guys who do get the chance to go and, have the opportunity and the ability, I hope that you guys get to go. I know it's tough. It's hard when they announce their like other projects and you're like, but I'm saving, why? But I'm really excited. I really enjoyed. I was in a very similar boat when Yoongi did the August D tour, but I loved seeing everything that was coming out of just watching armies put up their concert experiences and bits and pieces from the concert. So I'm really excited to see that stuff. Oh, very awesome. So Lollapalooza in Berlin, the New York concert. That's great. Oh, that's great. That is so exciting. You guys are going to have to share your experiences for sure. I would love to hear how it went. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. And I like how I say that's all as if I haven't been talking for almost 3 hours, but we covered a lot of ground today. I feel like there's still so much I could talk about with Map of the Soul, so don't worry, I will definitely be doing videos on a lot more for Map of the Soul, because I just love it. I look at it as such a special album, and it was so important to me as a early army, and it's still important to me. So I wanted to celebrate it. It's been 5 years with this album, and it's still as relevant today as it was then. It feels so warm and nostalgic for me to go back and explore this album, and I had so much fun being able to explore it with you guys. Thank you so much. I'm really glad that you had a good time, and we'll definitely talk more about Map of the Soul 7 on the channel. Like I said, I'm not sure when my next live stream will be. I definitely have plans to do one as we get closer to the anniversary of HYYH. But I'll see if I have the opportunity to do any other streams in between then and now. And just kind of see what my work schedule looks like, and see if we have an opportunity to have some more fun and chat together, because I just love chatting with you guys as well. So even if we don't have a theme. And yes, I definitely will. I would also love to do a stream around when all the rest of the guys get out of the military. So we'll definitely have a fun stream to chat then, and we'll have to have some time to chat so you guys can talk about your concert experiences. I'd love to hear what you guys experience. So you are so welcome, everybody. Thank you all for being here. I'm so thrilled that you all were here and we could chat. And I'm so glad you had fun and enjoyed yourself. I hope you guys have a great weekend. Bye, everybody. I'll see you. Take care. Bye bye. Definitely, I'll definitely do it again as soon as possible, and I'll definitely give you guys some notice. I'm working on the Dionysus video, which will hopefully be my next video. So hopefully you'll be seeing some new videos coming within the next couple weeks as well. Right. Bye bye, everyone. Thanks for being here.